We are men, human beings, capable of the same acts as any other race, possessing under fair circumstances the same intelligence as any other race. Now Africa's been sleeping, not dead, only sleeping. Today Africa's walking around not only on our feet, but on our brains. You can enslave as was done for 300 years the bodies of men. You can shackle the hands of men. You can shackle the men, but you cannot shackle or imprison the minds of men.
Marcus Garvey understood something long before social media, before motivational speakers, and before self-help books became popular, which is that the greatest prison a person can live in is not physical limitation, but mental submission, and that no system can permanently dominate a people who believe deeply in their own worth and potential. This is why his message frightened so many people, because it did not begin with protest. It began with self-belief. Marcus Garvey was born in 1887 in Jamaica, at a time when the world was structured in a way that constantly reinforced the idea that black people were inferior, incapable of leadership, and destined to remain at the margins of global power. And from a young age, Garvey was deeply aware of this contradiction, because he observed that intelligence, discipline, and ambition existed all around him, yet the world refused to acknowledge it. As a young man, he travelled extensively, working in Central America, and later moving to London, where he exposed himself to political ideas, global movements, and the machinery of empire. And it was during this period that he began to understand something that would shape the rest of his life, which is that control over a people is never maintained by force alone, but by controlling how they see themselves. When Garvey returned to Jamaica in 1914, he founded the Universal Negro Improvement Association, an organization built on a simple but radical idea, that black people everywhere must reclaim pride in their identity, build their own institutions, and stop waiting for validation from systems that never intended to empower them. His message was not comfortable, and it was not subtle, because he spoke directly about self-reliance, economic independence, and mental liberation, and he challenged people to stop measuring themselves through the standards of those who had historically excluded them. Eventually, Garvey moved to the United States, where his movement grew rapidly, attracting millions of followers across continents, making him one of the most influential black leaders of the early 20th century. Not because he held political office, but because he reshaped how people thought about themselves. He understood that before any meaningful external change could occur, internal transformation had to come first, because a people who see themselves as inferior will unconsciously recreate systems that limit them, even when freedom becomes available.
Liberate the minds of men, and ultimately you will liberate the bodies of men. We love the white race, not for social fellowship, but for the common brotherhood of God intended we should live. What satisfaction can anyone get in being happy and see his brother wallowing in filth, dirt, and disease? How can you be happy living in luxury and your brother's living in disease, and then when you try to help the one out of the disease, the subtle culprit talks about disloyalty?
Garvey was speaking to a world where black people were told, repeatedly and systematically, that they were inferior, incapable of self-governance, and in constant need of supervision, and he recognized that before political freedom could mean anything, mental freedom had to come first, because without self-belief, freedom feels unfamiliar and even dangerous. History confirms this insight repeatedly. Marcus Garvey taught that self-belief was not arrogance, but preparation, because a people who see themselves clearly do not wait to be invited into systems that exclude them. They build their own institutions, define their own standards, and protect their own dignity, not out of hatred for others, but out of respect for themselves. This is why his ideas traveled across continents, because they addressed an internal wound that politics alone could not heal. History shows us that systems of control are deeply uncomfortable with confident populations, because confidence produces independence, and independence produces questions, and questions eventually expose contradictions, which is why education, narrative control, and self-image have always been central tools of dominance. Garvey understood that once people stop seeing themselves as inferior, exploitation becomes difficult to justify. Today, many people are highly educated, highly skilled, and highly capable, yet still hesitate to step into leadership, innovation, or ownership, not because they lack talent, but because they have absorbed doubt so deeply that it feels like humility, when in truth it is simply learned insecurity. History reminds us that confidence is not loudness, it is rootedness, and people who are rooted do not need permission to stand upright. Marcus Garvey's greatest lesson is not about race or era. It is about self-definition, because when you define yourself, you take away the most powerful weapon any system has against you. History teaches us that self-belief is not the end of the struggle. It is the beginning of independence, and without it, no amount of progress will ever feel secure. Marcus Garvey's message still unsettles people today because self-belief is disruptive, and once people stop seeing themselves as inferior, exploitation becomes difficult to justify, and control becomes harder to maintain.
Any leadership that teaches you to depend upon another race is a leadership that will enslave you. Any leadership that teaches you to depend upon another race is a leadership that will enslave you. They gave leadership to our foreparents, and that leadership made them slaves. But we have decided to find a leadership of our own to make ourselves free men.
History teaches us that self-belief is not the end of the struggle, but it is the beginning of independence, because a people who define themselves do not wait to be chosen, invited, or approved. So the question is not whether you are capable, but whether you are willing to believe it long enough to act. Because the most powerful thing any person can do is decide who they are before the world decides for them. If this challenged your thinking, follow, share this message, and stay with the journey. History still has more to teach us.